Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Ari Talks About Music. I'm Ari, and today I'll be reviewing the new Samia album, Bloodless. Bloodless is the third album from the American singer-songwriter Samia, and is definitely somewhat of a departure from the sound of her previous two albums, with those having much more of a bedroom pop and indie pop leaning feel, whereas this one has much more of an emphasis on the folk side of her sound, just in general with the much simpler instrumentation and the acoustic guitar having a much bigger presence. Bovine Excision opens the album and is absolutely a strong start, starting off as this very simple folk pop song with absolutely beautiful guitar work that really feels like it just thrives off of its simplicity. I also just love the way the track progresses, being so natural and steady, as it just slowly adds all of the layers and slowly just gets a little bit louder as it goes. The vocals are also amazing, which is something that consistently has to be one of my favorite aspects of the whole album. And even during many of the much louder and more intense moments on this track, the vocals still just keep doing what they're doing, being so relaxed and calm, and it really just provides some really nice contrast and some light and shade even within just the song itself. Hole in a Frame is much more of the same as the opening track, however this time definitely does just feel like a slightly more watered down of that, with it still having all of the same really good vocals and guitar work of the previous song, however just without the fantastic pacing as well as the amazing climax. On paper it still ticks every box that you would want out of a good folk pop song, however I just can't help but feel that this song is so overshadowed by Bovine Excision, with that track setting the bar so high for the rest of the album, and to be honest does burn itself out just a little bit with the opening track being so good. The intro on Lizard does sound slightly out of place, just being a bit strange, but the track does pick up after that pretty quickly. The guitar work on this track again is absolutely beautiful, with there being so many really interesting sound choices as well. And even the vocals on this track as well are almost unsuspecting at first, but the further into the track you go and the more you focus on the vocals, the more you start to realize that they are still absolutely filled with passion. Dare is a much smoother track that I think just fits in really well and just provides the album with a much simpler and more stripped back moment. And this track is just beautifully dreamy, having these amazing echoing guitars and really good production even with how simple it is. Fair Game is just another super simple and very stripped back song, however it does have hints of other instruments making appearances on top of the guitar, which is good to just keep this track more interesting and dynamic. And I think that just the much more organic sound of this track is definitely a nice shift from the previous track, obviously with the guitar still being the primary instrument on both tracks. However, on Fair Game, there's definitely less of a focus on atmosphere and just being so dreamy, which I think is definitely a nice tone shift, given that the focus of the whole album is generally more on the actual folk sound and the guitar work as opposed to just the atmosphere. Spine Oil does then start to pick up a little bit again, which is really nice, given that the previous run of a few tracks have all been very calm, although all perfectly good. But the intro on this track just does an amazing job of building so much tension just in the way that the vocal sound and the guitar is played, with them both just being so good at creating a lot of suspense. And there are just so many of these really dreamy and almost whimsical sound effects going on that also really just add to the atmosphere. And even though when this track reaches its peak, it does feel very unsuspecting and could even be seen as underwhelming, somehow it still manages to be really satisfying, with it still evoking so much somehow despite its simplicity. Craziest Person is a nice little interlude, with obviously just being so much more simple and stripped back like many of the other songs on the album. The vocals are a tad monotonous, however it's only an interlude, so I could forgive that quite easily, given that it's only a minute long. And despite it being an interlude, it almost somehow works quite well as a track in its own right as well, despite the fact that it's so short. It does cut off quite abruptly, however the following track Scared does follow on very well, which just goes in with this absolutely beautiful guitar work and really just sounds so well arranged as well. I think on the whole this track is maybe just a little bit repetitive, but it's one of the shorter tracks on the album, so it's not that big of a deal, and it's still very easy to appreciate it for just the very good guitar work, very good vocals, and still everything else that's good about it. The intro of Carousel, I think, is just a little bit too quiet and really does kind of drag on, with it lasting quite a big portion of the song. However, when the song does eventually start building to its climax, it is just nothing short of beautiful. And given how quiet and simple the intro was, you never would have expected this song to become what it does, with it eventually just being so loud and there being these amazing guitars that just have so much reverb and so much distortion that even surrounded by a much more folk pop leaning album is still one of the best moments on the whole thing. And I think that the latter half of this track has to be just one of the best moments on the whole album, and it's just a shame that you have to sit through that very long intro to get there. Proof then follows on really nicely, just giving you a chance to breathe after such an intense outro outro on the previous song, and really just feels like it's good at what it does, and just lets you really get lost in how beautiful the vocals and guitar work are, just like they are consistently really good on the whole album. North Poles does then pick up a little bit again, just being a lot more upbeat, and definitely just standing out as one of the least sad songs on the album, with especially just the vocals really helping to evoke that feeling. One of my favourite things about this track as well is just the way it builds, the way the guitars slowly become louder as the track goes, with it overall just feeling like a very natural progression. And then finally, Pants closes the album, almost feeling a little bit unsuspecting at first, with the intro of this song definitely feeling quite underwhelming and almost feeling like as if it's not really going to do all that much. However, given this track's length coming in at just over 6 minutes, it does still absolutely have the chance to build and progress, which it absolutely does, with definitely the latter half having much more of a sense of finality to it. It's definitely one of those songs that feels like it has many coherent parts to it, which I think ending the album like that does actually work very well. And there's really just so much going on this song, with there being moments of it being a lot more intense and heavier, as there have been a handful of moments on the album, and of course most of it is just very simple vocals and guitar work. But I do want to mention just the last couple of minutes especially, just being so chill and so simple, and really just ending the album exactly how you would want it to, on nothing too intense, and just really having the album be able to leave quietly. And so I think overall that Samia has come through with just a really solid indie folk album that definitely sees just much more of an emphasis on the guitar work and the folk aspect of her sound, which I think that she has done consistently well on this album. I do also absolutely love just the diversity in the light and shade, with most of this album just being very simple and very quiet. However, it does just have the odd burst where it really goes for it, just about every single moment where it does that being incredibly satisfying. And so then overall, this album is going to get a 7 out of 10 from me. Thank you so much for watching this review. Please be sure to listen to this album yourself and tell me your thoughts below. Please leave a like if you liked the video, and please leave a dislike if you didn't like the video, and remember to stay hydrated.